Hi everybody and welcome to this video. My name is Jannis and I'm a huge fan of the 𝗙𝗏𝗀𝗏, which is what I'm going to speak about in this video. But at the same time, I know that it's not the perfect instrument for everyone. So I guess you're currently researching drum pads because you want to buy one, but really don't know which one to get or just need some additional information. And I really hope this video can help you with it. First, it's really important to understand that there are two types of drum pads, because there are sample pads, like for example those Roland pads or also this Yamaha DTX, I think it's called, and synthesizers like the 𝗙𝗏𝗀𝗏, because sample pads can play samples like wave files that you create on your computer and you can then load them on the pad. Well, this is not possible with the 𝗙𝗏𝗀𝗏, and I'll just repeat it because it might be the only information you actually needed. You can't put your own samples on the 𝗙𝗏𝗀𝗏. If this was the one information you needed, still consider giving the video a quick like before you leave if it was still helpful. But I want to elaborate a little on the difference between sampling pad versus synth engine, because on the 𝗙𝗏, all sounds you create are created inside the pad. So it has some synth engine, basically like some analog synth, but in a digital modeled version. And you save your presets based on parameters you change on the pad. And you can also save the presets on the computer, but it's a very specific file format that you can only open on the pad itself. Whereas with those sample pads, you basically prepare the samples in the best possible way before you put them on the pad. So for example, you made some super cool kick drum with a soft synth on your computer, then you bounce it and then you put it on the pad so you can play exactly that sound without having many options to alter it. Or actually, there are options, but not that significantly. And I would say if you know that you absolutely don't like sound design and you never want to fiddle around on your pad for changing parameters, sample pads would be better for you. But if you know you kind of like this idea of quickly being able to change sounds, being a bit creative, going with the flow, then the 𝗙𝗏 might be the more fun option for you. Now, chances are you're still somewhere in between because you like the kind of creative potential of the 𝗙𝗏, but also know at some point you really need to trigger some samples. So I want to give you some additional things to consider. Most importantly, you can always use MIDI. So for example, you can connect the 𝗙𝗏 to your DAW or like some hardware sampler and trigger your favorite drum samples through that. So the drum sample is not going to be on the 𝗙𝗏, but for example in your DAW like Ableton or Logic, and this works really seamlessly. Also with the other pads, you can actually use the Roland pad, for example, to control your favorite synthesizer plugin inside Ableton Live or Logic or whatever DAW you're using, or even use it to play melodies on your favorite hardware synth. But here it's now important to check what you really need, because the 𝗙𝗏 is really limited in terms of pads. So it has 6 pads and almost no expansion possibilities, because the only thing you can do is add a kick drum pedal, which then again occupies 1 pad slot. So in no scenario you're able to play more than 6 different sounds. Whereas those sampling pads usually come with more pads, at least 9, and I think the Yamaha one even has 12, I'm not sure anymore. And also give you possibilities for expansion, so you can add external triggers, you can add external pads. So if you just need more sounds at the same time, that might be a deal breaker for you. If it's important for you that you have a clear big display that actually can display names and potentially song lists for concerts, you'll also have your problems with the 𝗙𝗏𝗀𝗏, because it seems quite outdated in terms of the visual feedback. All you get is some kind of combination of A3 or B34 or those types of things. And in the beginning that can be really intimidating, and especially for live set lists you need some additional list where you know, okay, for this concert I have song 1 on position B1, song 2 on position B2, and so on. And especially over time, it's kind of a challenge to keep track of what you saved where, because it can easily happen that you just overwrite your favorite drum set. Overall, I'd say if you're looking for the most realistic representation of drum sounds within a small setup, you'll be probably better off with a sample pad, because here you can control the sound 100%, making sure that the samples sound exactly the way you want them to be, and you don't have to rely on some synth engine, unless you use MIDI, of course. But if you're using a synth engine, you always kind of have the character of that synth engine. I like it a lot, of the 𝗙𝗏, but maybe it's not to your liking, and sometimes you have scenarios where you just need some different sound. And also if it comes to expression control, you're a bit limited on the Nord drum. So with hi-hat, for example, there's no chance to add some foot switch or some other type of control that lets you switch between open and closed hi-hat. Whereas on those sample pads, often you can add a foot switch, and also you can add like 2 different sounds per sample. And this way have this kind of effect, while on the Nord drum you have to improvise. And usually what I do if I want to have some similar type of effect is that I have some dynamic response to my velocity and the decay. But again, this is a workaround and not some realistic representation. And I was focusing a little on the potential weaknesses of the Nord drum 3P, so you might think now, okay, it's cool that it can make sounds by itself, but I can still use plugins and stuff and control them with the other pad while also being able to have more pads and being more flexible, which might be true, but I also want to turn the narrative around now, because all those weaknesses of the Nord drum 3P you can actually also put into a positive light, because if you look at the workflow of the instrument from some different angle and accept the limitations, it actually totally makes sense. So let me get into this. So while those other sample pads, as I mentioned, have like way bigger displays, better displays, and just look more intuitive, they also usually come packed with functions that you don't need, because with those interfaces you always click yourself through menus endlessly, and it can really take a lot of energy. And the Nord drum has some totally straightforward approach, because there's basically one function per knob or some alternative function if you press a shift button. And in the beginning, it's a bit confusing to see those little things like C2 or just a value, and you don't really know what it is. But there's quite a steep learning curve to it. And once you appreciate that, you'll be able to make changes way quicker than you would on those sample pads, because you don't have a long menu. You're always immediately where you want to be with the Nord drum 3P in terms of changing sound parameters. And I feel like it has fewer options, so it doesn't come packed with like 20 effects. But also I feel like, why would you add a phaser on your drum pad if you prepared the sample in the best possible way on your computer anyways? And also to get to the phaser, you usually have to click yourself through this menu. So it's nothing that really happens in the heat of the moment. While with the Nord drum, once you get used to those controls, you can actually make musical decisions. So if you're playing a concert and feel like, okay, today at this venue the sound is a little too dull, so let's open the filter a little. And if you get used to the interface, that can be made in no time. And if I think about it, I use all the buttons regularly, so there's not really this one button where I feel like, okay, I never touch it because it just doesn't make any sense for what I'm trying to do musically. Here, I actually use all of them, and I find this very unique because I know it from other plugins especially that they have tons of features, but I ignore most of them because I feel like, okay, it doesn't really help me with what I'm trying to do. But here, it's just a limitation that totally makes sense, because everything what is here really makes some impact on the sound. And maybe the only thing I'm careful with is the effect section, because it comes with a reverb and a delay, and I just prefer using my own effects, and I'm not a huge fan of effects being built into this type of instrument. But apart from that, everything is totally relevant, and actually is some super straightforward approach that helps you with being creative. Another feature that might not be so obvious on the first look is that you get some super powerful hardware sequencer, because while those other pads are more like some executive devices where you tell them what to do, but on the pad themselves there's nothing that can be turned into something new like a sound or similar. Here, you can use it as your main production hub, basically, because you can connect a MIDI keyboard and also play those melodies on a keyboard, giving you totally different expression possibilities. You can connect sequencers or your DAW and send in stuff, so you only focus on changing parameters, which is something you could do for some ambient sets, and I feel like some of the sounds are really amazing for like ambient sets. And you can just sequence it, or there's also software from somebody called Ableton drummer Toby, and he does super amazing mix for live devices. I mean, that's Ableton specific, but giving you even more possibilities for turning this into something very unique. And I think if you know that you like experimentation, sound experimentation, and also have this urge to constantly look for new ways of using your gear, it will take a while until you get tired of this thing. And while it's called not drum sounds are just a tiny fraction of what you can create with it, because in my opinion the most amazing thing is playing melodies with the Nord drum. Because even if you have zero idea about how melodies are created and about music theory, with just a few tweaks you can start playing melodies on the pad, even with the worst technique. But I believe that drumming is always a little more intuitive than playing piano, for example, and everybody can have fun with this pad. And no matter if you like vintage synth sounds or like tuned percussion sounds like some marimba phone or vibraphone, or if you want to play like some bass sounds, that's all possible with the Nord drum. I also want to speak about the size, because while those other pads give you more sounds you can play at the same time, the Nord drum is smaller, so it has fewer options, but it's also more portable, which might be a factor for you. And for me it really is, because I have some DJ backpack where I can put in the Nord drum, my laptop, the interface, and a few controllers and cables, and travel this way. So I can take my mobile setup anywhere I go, and that's a total game changer for me, especially being a drummer and being used to having to carry always those super bulky items. This feels so freeing and I absolutely love it. Now, after all this talking, I warmly invite you to check out some actual music, because I have some videos on my channel where I made full performances with only Nord drum sounds, and I'll link you a playlist down below in the description. And also be known that in case you decide to buy a Nord drum, I have lots of content about it. So there are tutorials, I'll link you a playlist. Also, there are performances I mentioned already. I also made some sound banks for the Nord drum, and I also made a class for learning drums specifically with electronic drum pads. This one you can even do if you decide to buy another pad. So be warmly invited to check all of this out. The links are down below in the description. And also there's a link, like some affiliate link, if you decide to buy the Nord drum and want to say thank you for this video at no additional extra cost for you. You can just use the link, and all of them are down below in the description. Apart from that, I wish you lots of inspiration with whatever it is that you create. Hope you make the right decision for what drum pad you will get, and I hope to see you soon again at this channel. Bye!